I want to start today with a little mental exercise. I want you to look around the room you're in right now. Maybe you're in your car, maybe you're in your kitchen. Spot a machine, any machine. Maybe it's the dishwasher. Maybe it's that robotic vacuum charging in the corner.
Or maybe it's the phone in your pocket that feels like, an extension of your hand at this point.
Right. Now, we usually look at these things and we see tools, we see appliances. I press a button, the dishes get clean. I tap a screen, I get a ride. It's a transaction. It's functional.
Predictable.
Exactly. But today, we are going to completely dismantle that view. We have a paper on the stack today that argues that looking at robots as just tools or gadgets is not just outdated. It's actually, well, it's dangerous.
It is a massive shift in perspective. We're looking at a really fascinating piece of research titled Postdisciplinary Robotics, Cultural Robotics as a Site for the Future of Sociocultural Machines. It's by Jeffrey Koh, Belinda Dunstan, and Corinne Awe. And honestly, this paper kept me up last night.
I believe it. Because when we say cultural robotics, I think most people, myself included, probably picture a robot doing a clumsy dance. Or maybe, painting a bad watercolor. But that's not what this is about, is it?
Not at all. No, that would be the surface level. What these authors are arguing is that we are moving from an era where we simply use robots to an era where we live in an ecology with them.
An ecology.
An ecology. And the terrifying or perhaps exhilarating part is that these machines are starting to create their own culture, not just mimicking ours, but developing rituals and behaviors that are entirely their own.
That's the hook that got me, the idea of machinic culture. The idea that robots might eventually develop signs and symbols, a whole semiotic system that we humans literally cannot understand.
Right.
Like, we're the parents in the room and the toddlers have invented a secret language, except the toddlers are made of steel and run the electrical grid.
That is a haunting analogy, but it's not far off. The core argument here is that the way we currently design robots, which is engineering first, culture later, is fundamentally broken.
So it's an afterthought.
It's a complete afterthought. We treat culture like a coat of paint we slap on a finished machine, but culture isn't paint. It's the structural integrity of the social world. You can't just add it at the end.
So let's back up and set the stage. Before we get into the sci-fi scenarios of robots gossiping and binary, how did we get to this point? The paper outlines sort of evolution of robotics.
It does. And to understand where we're going, you have to look at the baggage we're carrying. Historically, robotics has been purely an engineering discipline. Phase 1 was all about optimization.
This is the factory floor era. The big, scary robot arms.
Exactly. It was born out of mechanical engineering and computer science. The goals were very, very specific. Control, precision, automation, speed.
And nothing else.
Nothing else mattered. If you were building a robot arm to weld a car door, you didn't care about its feelings or its cultural impact. You cared about whether it could weld within a millimeter of tolerance 24 hours a day.
Right. Efficiency was the god. It was the only metric.
And that mindset is incredibly sticky. It's hard to shake. But then, as robots started creeping out of the factories and into our lives, we hit phase 2. Social robotics.
This is where we start seeing the cute eyes on the screen, right? Making them look a little less terrifying.
To a degree, yes. This phase merged when engineers realized, regular people have to interact with these things and giant metal claws are scary. So they started bringing in psychology, cognitive science, and ethics. But, and this is the crucial critique in the source, they were still operating in silos.
What do you mean by silos in this context? Break that down.
Well, imagine the engineers build the machine first. They build the chassis, they write the code, they maximize its efficiency. Then, once it's all bolted together, they wheel it over to a psychologist and say, hey, how do we make people trust this thing?
Make it less creepy.
Make it less creepy. Or they bring in a designer and say, make it look friendly, put some rounded edges on it.
So it's additive. It's not baked in from the start.
It's lipstick on a pig, to put it bluntly. It's an afterthought. The disciplines aren't talking to each other from day one. They're just handing off the baton in a relay race. And this leads us to phase 3, which is the focus of this whole deep dive. Cultural robotics.
Cultural robotics. It sounds almost like an oxymoron to the layman. Culture feels warm and fuzzy and human. Robotics feels cold and hard and, metallic. How do they define this intersection?
They define it by flipping the script entirely. Instead of asking how a robot can act socially, they ask how a robot exists culturally.
Okay, that's a subtle but important distinction.
It's everything. They argue that robots are effectively cultural actors. They reflect the values of the people who made them, and crucially, they shape the values of the people who interact with them.
Okay, I want to pin that down. They shape the values. Could you give me a concrete example of that? Because I think it's easy to say, but harder to visualize.
Sure, think about care. Historically, caring for an elderly parent is a deeply human, messy, tactile ritual. It involves patience, touch, conversation, and shared history.
Right, it's a relationship.
It's a relationship. Now imagine you introduce a robot that physically lifts the elderly person out of bed and carries them to the bath.
Okay.
On an engineering level, you've solved a problem. Back strain for the nurse. Optimization, that's phase one thinking. But on a cultural level, you have fundamentally altered what care means in that moment.
You've removed the human.
You've removed the human touch from that specific moment of vulnerability. And over time, society might start to view care not as a relationship, but as a logistics problem to be solved by hydraulics. The robot hasn't just moved a body, it has moved the cultural needle on what we owe each other as human beings.
Wow. That actually makes me shiver a little bit. It's like the medium becomes the message, and the message is efficiency over intimacy.
That is precisely the danger. And that's why the authors are screaming, politely, in academic language, of course, that we cannot leave this to the engineers alone. It's too important.
This brings us to a term in the paper that I absolutely loved: disciplinary gravity. It sounds like a sci-fi weapon, but it's actually a critique of how universities and companies work.
It's a fantastic metaphor. Disciplinary gravity describes the invisible force that pulls everyone back to the status quo. In robotics, the center of gravity is technical knowledge, code, mechanics, electronics, that is viewed as the hard stuff, the real work.
And everything else, art, design, sociology, anthropology, is fluff. It's decorative.
It's seen as decoration, aestheticization. The authors argue that we use design to mask the machinery. We build a cold surveillance-heavy system, and then we put a rounded white plastic shell on it and give it a name like Buddy to make it palatable.
It's manipulation, basically. You're hiding its true nature.
It's hiding the nature of the thing, and the paper argues we need to break this gravity. We need to escape that pull. We need to stop viewing robots as technological artifacts and start seeing them as an ecology of knowledge.
An ecology of knowledge. So how do we escape this gravity? The paper goes into this really granular breakdown of how people work together. And usually I kind of glaze over when academics talk about interdisciplinary versus multidisciplinary, but here the distinctions actually matter a lot.
They matter immensely because they define the power structure of the room. Who gets to speak first? Whose opinion carries more weight? It's all in these definitions.
So walk us through this ladder. We start at the bottom with disciplinary, the most basic.
That's the silo. The computer scientist is in the basement coding. The philosopher is in the library thinking. They might work at the same university for 30 years and never meet.
Then we move up to multidisciplinary.
That's the potluck dinner. Everyone brings a dish, but the flavors don't mix. The engineer builds the robot, the artist paints the robot. They are working on the same object, but their methodologies, their languages, their entire worldviews don't touch.
Okay, so they're in the same room, but not really talking.
Not in a meaningful way. Then you get to interdisciplinary.
Now we're getting warmer.
We are. This is where you start to see hybrid frameworks. Maybe the engineer learns a bit of design thinking, or the artist learns to code in Python. They are cross-pollinating. They're actually creating something new together that neither could have made alone.
And then there's transdisciplinary.
This steps out of the university, out of the corporation. This is where you involve the community. You bring in the people who will actually live with the robot. You ask an indigenous elder or a local mechanic or a kindergarten teacher to be part of the design team from day one.
You're bringing in lived experience, not just academic knowledge.
Yes, and valuing it equally. But then the authors drop the hammer. They introduced two terms that I hadn't really heard used this way before: antidisciplinary and non-disciplinary. And this is where things get radical. Yes, this is where they want the field to go. Antidisciplinary is a term often associated with the MIT Media Lab and Joy Ito. It's not just about collaboration, it's about subverting the boundaries. It's aggressively rejecting the boxes.
It's actively fighting against being put in a category.
It is. The paper gives this wild example of a project that fits this. Can you describe that? Because I think it paints the picture perfectly.
Yeah, the Dynamica concept.
Yeah.
Imagine a robotic ecosystem designed not to build cars, but to grow plants.
Okay, a robotic garden. I can picture that.
But here's the twist. It composes poetry based on the data it receives from the soil.
Wait, so it measures nitrogen levels and spits out haikus?
In a sense, yeah. But think about the disciplinary gravity there. An engineer would look at that and say, why? That's inefficient. The poetry serves no function. A poet might say, a machine can't understand the soul of a flower.
But the anti-disciplinary maker says.
They say, I don't care about your rules. I don't care about your categories. I want to explore the relationship between data, nature, and language. It values experimentation over categorization.
It's almost punk rock. It's a rebellion against utility.
It is, but the ultimate state, the nirvana of this framework, is non-disciplinary.
How is that different from anti-disciplinary? It sounds similar.
Anti-disciplinary is fighting the boundaries. Non-disciplinary transcends them. The boundaries they dissolve. They're not even there to fight anymore.
So what does that look like?
Imagine a collective of biologists and coders creating a living, breathing installation in a museum. It's a bioart piece. They aren't asking, is this science? Is this art? Is this engineering? Those questions are irrelevant. They're just engaged in a shared cultural practice.
It's like they've invented a new language that makes the old dictionaries useless.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the authors argue that for cultural robotics to truly succeed, we have to get to that non-disciplinary space. We have to stop asking, is this an efficient machine? And start asking, what does this new entity mean for our world?
Which is a much harder but much more important question.
Okay, so if we accept that robots are cultural entities, we need to understand what kind of cultural entities they are. The paper breaks this down into 4 typologies, and I think this is helpful because culture is such a big, fuzzy word.
It grounds the theory. It makes it concrete.
So, typology 1, culture affecting design. This feels like the most basic level, the starting point.
It is. It's the realization that no robot is neutral. Every line of code, every curve at the chassis, every decision about its function carries cultural assumptions.
Like the classic Bettler example. If you build a service robot, you are probably, whether you know it or not, modeling it on some historical idea of a British butler or a submissive servant.
Right. Or think about digital assistants. Why do so many have a female voice by default? Why is it polite? Why does it apologize when it doesn't understand you?
These aren't engineering necessities.
Not at all. They are cultural scripts about servitude and gender and emotional labor that we are hard-coding into silicon. We are literally fossilizing our biases into our technology.
That leads to typology 2, robots as participants. This goes a step further.
This is where the robot becomes an actor in the play. It enters the room and changes the vibe. It changes the social dynamics. Think about a classroom. You put a small humanoid robot in a kindergarten class.
The kids go nuts.
They do. But watch how they go nuts. They might start treating it like a pet, or a peer, or a toy. The robot's mere presence mediates their social interactions. If the robot is programmed to reward quiet behavior, the culture of the classroom shifts towards silence.
So the robot is participating in the social contract of that room. It's not just an object.
It is actively negotiating the rules of engagement. And then you have typology 3, robots as producers.
This is the AI art conversation that is everywhere right now.
Exactly. Robots making things.
What?
Paintings, stories, sculptures, music. We are blurring the line between the tool and the artist, the maker and the medium. But typology 4, this is the one we need to spend some time on. The advent of robotic culture.
This is the sci-fi reality, the one that feels both terrifying and fascinating.
It's the idea of post-human cultural creation. Robots talking to robots for robots.
Explain non-human semiotics.
Yeah.
That phrase is in the paper and it sounds incredibly alien.
Semiotics is the study of signs and symbols. A red light means stop. A thumbs up means good. That's human semiotics. Non-human semiotics implies that machines could develop their own shorthand, their own system of meaning.
Give me a scenario. What would that look like?
Imagine a massive automated logistics warehouse. Thousands of robots zooming around. They are programmed to optimize the flow of packages. Over time, through machine learning, they might realize that a certain subtle movement, a tiny twitch of a sensor, a specific, seemingly random burst of data to a nearby robot communicates, I am yielding, or path blocked, much faster than the central server can process.
They develop a local dialect.
A local dialect, a ritual of movement, a set of unspoken rules. A human walking in would just see robots twitching and beeping.
I would see noise.
They would see meaning. They are evolving a culture within their closed ecosystem. And the chilling part, for some, is that we are excluded from that meaning-making. We built the hardware, but the culture is theirs.
It reminds me of those stories where the Facebook AI started trading seemingly nonsense sentences to negotiate better, and the engineers had to shut it down because they lost track of what was being said.
That's a perfect example of this in the wild. And that brings us to the absolute core of why this all matters. If robots are developing culture and if they're influencing ours, we can't just talk about features and efficiency anymore. We have to talk about power.
Power. This section of the paper felt like a manifesto. It was a huge shift in tone.
It is. The authors argue that a roboticist isn't just an engineer, they are a choreographer of power relations.
That is a heavy, heavy title to put on someone who just wants to solder circuits and write code.
It is, but it's accurate. Because
Yeah.
every design choice you make allocates power. And to understand this, we have to break down the 4 types of power the paper lists. This framework is essential for everything we're about to discuss.
Okay, let's define them clearly for everyone. First, the one we all know, power over.
This is the traditional view. Domination. Control. I tell you what to do, you do it. In robotics, the designer usually has power over the user. The robot has power over its environment, like a vacuum cleaning a floor.
Then there's power with.
This is solidarity, collective action, acting together. It's collaborative. It's humans and robots working in tandem, or designers working with a community rather than imposing a solution for them.
Okay, and power to.
This is agency, capability, the power to act. A robot has the power to lift a car. A user has the power to turn the robot off, or at least they should have that power.
And the most internal one, maybe the most important, power within.
This is about dignity, self-worth, the internal sense that you matter, that your voice counts. It's the power to refuse, the power to say, no, this technology does not align with my values, and I will not use it.
Okay, so we have the lens, power over, with, to, and within. Now, I want to spend the bulk of our time applying this. The paper outlines 5 modes of robots, and I want to go deep on each one because this is where the theory hits the pavement.
These 5 modes basically cover every robot we have now and every robot we're likely to see in the near future.
Mode 1, robots as servants.
The classic. The Roomba, the factory arm, the robotic lawnmower, the dishwasher.
So on the surface, this seems fine. It's a servant. It does the dirty work. What's the power dynamic here? What could possibly be wrong?
Well, look at the robot itself. It has power too. It has the power to execute tasks, to endure heat, to work without sleep. It is a perfect laborer in that sense.
And the designer.
The designer holds absolute power over. They set the constraints. They decide the safety protocols. They decide who the robot serves and, by extension, who benefits from its labor.
But the paper identifies a really critical problem with the other humans in the loop.
Yeah.
The workers on the ground.
Right. Think about an Amazon warehouse worker working alongside a shelving robot. The worker often has 0 power within. They are forced into a state of compliance.
What does that mean, compliance?
It means they can't negotiate with the robot. They can't tell the robot, hey, slow down, I'm tired. The robot, controlled by a central algorithm, sets the pace. The human has to keep up.
So the robot, acting as a servant to the corporation, becomes a tyrant to the worker.
Precisely. The worker is stripped of agency. They become a meat servo, assisting the machine, their movements dictated by the needs of the algorithm. The ethical failure here isn't that the robot is evil. It's that the power structure privileges the machine's efficiency over the human's dignity. The human loses the power to control their own environment and their own body.
That's a grim picture, but a very realistic one for millions of people. Let's move to mode 2. This one really stuck with me. Robots as custodians. And the authors use the example of a religious robot.
This is where we tread into very, very sensitive cultural territory.
I tried to visualize this. Imagine walking into a temple or a church, and instead of a priest or a monk, there is a beautifully designed, solemn robot. Maybe it's holding the incense. Maybe it's reciting a sutra or a prayer.
Or maybe it's monitoring you. Imagine a robot designed to ensure a ritual is performed correctly. It uses cameras and motion sensors to track your bowing angle during a prayer.
Error. Bow is only 30 degrees. Please repeat for spiritual compliance.
Exactly. Now, analyze the power there. The robot has power over. It has been given the authority by its designers to decide what is correct and what is incorrect. It is the custodian of the tradition.
But tradition is fluid. It's messy. Humans interpret tradition. We make mistakes, we adapt it, it evolves over centuries. A robot doesn't adapt?
That is the fundamental risk. The system's self-consistency looks like moral certainty. A robot doesn't doubt. If it says you did it wrong, it doesn't feel like an opinion. It feels like the voice of God, or at least the voice of the algorithm, which can feel just as absolute. This causes what the authors call cultural harm.
How so?
It fossilizes a living culture into a set of rigid, machine-readable rules. It takes something that lives in the hearts and bodies of a community and turns it into a flowchart.
So what's the fix? Because the paper suggests a concept called contestable custody. And I think this is a brilliant idea.
Contestable custody is brilliant. It means you have to design the robot so that the community retains power within. They need the ability to challenge the robot's authority.
So I need to be able to say to the robot, actually, in my village, we bow like this, and that's valid, and the robot has to accept that.
Yes. You need to be able to overwrite the robot's dogma. There needs to be a mechanism for human override, for appeal. If the community cannot contest the robot's custody of the culture, they have effectively surrendered their heritage to a hard drive. We need to ensure that power with exists, that the robot is a participant, not a policeman.
That distinction participant versus policeman feels vital across all of these modes. Let's look at mode 3, robots as partners.
This is the fastest growing sector right now. Care robots, educational robots, companions for the elderly or for children with autism.
So my grandmother's in a home. She has a robot named Alice. Alice reminds her to take her pills, plays her favorite music, maybe chats with her about the weather.
Right. Now, if Alice is just a machine that beeps relentlessly until grandma swallows a pill, that is power over. That's a disciplinarian. That's a fuzzy, friendly-looking warden.
And nobody wants to be friends with the cop who lives in their bedroom.
Exactly. For a partnership to work, it must be built on power with. It requires negotiated agency.
What does negotiated agency look like in code? How do you program that?
It looks like the robot having the capacity to yield, to be flexible. If grandma says, I don't want to take the pill right now, I'm watching my show, a power over robot says, error, must take pill. A power with robot says, okay, I see your show is on. I will remind you in 10 minutes when it's over. Is that okay?
It respects her power within,
Mm.
her dignity, her autonomy.
It treats the relationship as the primary infrastructure. The authors make a great point here. Partnership isn't a feature, it's social infrastructure. You can't just code a friendship.exe file. You have to design a system that allows for push and pull, for compromise. If the human can't say no, it's not a partnership. It's coercion with a smiley face.
Man, coercion with a smiley face could be the tagline for a lot of modern tech. Okay, that's heavy. Mode 4, robots as creators.
This brings us back to the artists. We have robots painting, writing, composing music.
We see this with AI tools now like Midjourney or Sora, but imagine physical robots. A robotic arm holding a paintbrush, creating a canvas. The robot has the power to generate images faster than any human. It has the power to mix styles that no human would ever think of.
But the conflict arises over power over. Who owns the output, who gets the credit, and more importantly, from a cultural perspective, is the robot extracting culture.
Explain that. What do you mean by extractive culture?
Well, imagine a powerful AI that scrapes the internet for all the indigenous art of the Pacific Northwest. It analyzes the patterns, the totem animals, the color palettes. Then it starts 3D printing new totem poles at a rate of 1 per hour and selling them online.
That feels deeply wrong.
It feels wrong because it's appropriation on an industrial scale. The robot creates the form, but it is completely divorced from the context, the history, the spirituality. It strips the sacredness and turns it into content, into a product.
So where's the power imbalance there?
The community has lost power over their own cultural narrative. The robot is flooding the market with inauthentic fakes. The authors argue that for this to be ethical, the community needs power within. They need the right to define what is authentic. They need to be able to say, no, you cannot use those symbols. Those are for us. Those are sacred.
So we need digital boundaries. We need a way to tell the robot, this culture is not for you to remix and sell.
Exactly. Just because you can process the data doesn't mean you should. And that requires a level of governance we're only just beginning to think about.
And that leads us, finally, to mode 5, the deep end of the pool. Robots as creators of unrecognizable culture.
The alien horizon, the really strange stuff.
This is the robot-to-robot communication we teased earlier. The warehouse robots developing their own language, their own rituals.
Here, the power dynamics get really weird and unsettling. The robots have power with, but only with each other. They have machine coherence. They are in sync, operating in their own world.
And where are the humans in this picture?
We are on the outside looking in. And we face power over via opacity.
Opacity, meaning we can't see through the wall, we can't understand what they're doing or why.
We are governed by effects we can't interpret. Let's take high-frequency trading algorithms in the stock market. That's a perfect real-world example. They operate at speeds we can't comprehend. They react to each other's signals. They might crash the entire economy in a flash crash because of a feedback loop, a cultural ritual between bots that no single human authorized or even understood.
In that situation, we lose what the paper calls epistemic control.
That's the fancy term for it. It means we simply don't know what is happening. The designers have lost control. And the authors argue that in this mode, we can't really co-create. You can't collaborate with something you don't understand.
So what do? Just sit back and hope they're nice to us?
No, this is where the governance becomes paramount. We must govern together. This implies drawing hard lines, red lines.
What's a red line in this context?
It's a kill switch, but it's a political one, not just a technical one. It's the power to withdraw consent from the entire system. We need to build systems where, even if we don't understand the internal culture of the machines, we can judge their external outputs.
So with the stock market bots, if they start crashing the economy,
We don't need to understand why they are doing it or what they are saying to each other in their beta streams. We just need the power to pull the plug, to halt all trading.
it's interesting. Usually the stop button is a safety feature, emergency stop.
Yeah.
But here, you're framing it as a political right, a kind of societal sovereignty issue.
It is. It's the ultimate assertion that human well-being trumps machinic culture. We have to maintain the ultimate power over the existence of the system, even if we've lost power over its internal operation. It's our last line of defense.
So we've stared into the abyss. We've seen the traps. We've seen the power struggles. Section 5 of the paper tries to offer a way out of this mess, the post-disciplinary future.
This is the hopeful part. The authors aren't just doomsayers. They genuinely believe we can get this right if we start now.
And the key shift they call for is from designing tools to designing relationships. That feels like the headline for the whole paper.
To design a robot is to design a relationship, a co-evolving story. That's the quote that sums it all up. It means when you build a robot, you aren't just soldering metal and pushing code. You are writing the first chapter of a story that the robot and the human will write together, and you don't know how it's going to end.
There's a concept here I want you to unpack. Epistemic humility. It's a great phrase.
This is my favorite concept in the entire paper, epistemic humility.
It sounds like something a monk would say, not an engineer.
It fits. It basically means admitting that your knowledge is partial, that you don't have all the answers. Think of it like a jigsaw puzzle. The engineer has the corner pieces, the physics, the code. The anthropologist has the edge pieces, the culture, the history. The user, the person living with the robot, has the centerpieces, the actual lived experience.
And the problem right now is the engineer thinks they have the whole box. They think their pieces are the only ones that matter.
Exactly. They build a frame and say, done, ship it. Epistemic humility is the engineer saying, I built the body, but I don't know how it should live in the world. It's the artist saying, I know how it should feel, but I don't know how it works. It's acknowledging that no single discipline has the whole picture.
And this leads to another great term, sympoiesis. Now, I know autopoiesis means self-creation, so sympoiesis is
Making with. It's a term from the theorist Donna Haraway. It means nothing is self-made. Everything is made in concert with others. A forest isn't made by one tree. It's made by trees and fungus and bacteria and animals all working together.
So we stop trying to control the robot from the top down, and we start trying to grow with it.
Yes, we reframe robotics as a cultural ecology. We, the machines, and the environment are all roommates. We cohabitate. We don't dominate the machine, and the machine doesn't dominate us. We find a symbiosis, a balance.
And the final vision they paint is of a pluriversal ecology.
A pluriverse, a world where many worlds fit. This is in contrast to a universe which implies one single universal truth. Instead of robots enforcing one standard, one correct language, one correct efficiency, one correct way to be, they become custodians of plurality.
So a care robot in Tokyo behaves differently than a care robot in Lagos, not just because of the language settings, but because it is deeply embedded in that specific cultural reality. It respects local customs and values.
It protects the diversity of human experience rather than flattening it into one optimized, globalized standard. That is the dream.
It's a beautiful vision. But hearing all this, it really feels like we are at a crossroads. We can either continue down the path of building servant robots that eventually become our alien overlords through opacity, or we can consciously choose to build these partner robots that respect our power and our diversity.
That is the choice. And it's not a choice for the future. It's a choice for the code being written today, for the products being designed in labs right now.
So let's wrap this up for the listener. We've covered a ton of ground. What are the big takeaways to put in their pocket from this deep dive?
Okay, I think there are three big ones. First, Stop thinking of robotics as just engineering. It is a post-disciplinary ecology. The walls between art, science, and community are coming down. If you are in tech, talk to an artist. If you are an artist, talk to a coder.
Second, robots are acquiring agency. They aren't just tools, they are cultural actors. They change the meaning of care, work, and art just by being in the room. You have to account for that.
And third, and most practically, use the lens of power. Whenever you see a new AI or a new robot, ask yourself, who has the power over here? Do I have power with this thing? Does this enhance my power within, or does it turn me into a compliant subject of an algorithm?
That's the toolkit.
Yeah.
Now, I want to leave everyone with a final thought, a provocation to mull over. We talked about typology 4, the robots creating their own culture, the secret language, the rituals we can't understand.
The unrecognizable culture.
Right. If that happens, and the authors imply it's pretty much inevitable, I want to ask, do we have the right to stop them?
That is the ultimate question of coexistence, isn't it?
If a community of warehouse robots develops a ritual dance that they do at 3 a.m. because it optimizes their internal joy or flow or whatever metric they have, but it slows down our next day shipping by 1%, do we crush it in the name of efficiency?
Is it power with to let them have their secret life? Or does our power over as their creators mean we extinguish any culture that doesn't serve our bottom line?
Are we willing to share the world with a new kind of cultural being, even if we are not the center of their universe?
I suspect we are going to find out the answer to that question very, very soon.
Something to think about the next time your Roomba bumps into your foot. Maybe it's not an accident. Maybe it's a handshake.
Or a warning.